About 25 years ago, I fancied living in a big open space. And us coming from East London is very few and far between, because you only see those big, lovely loft spaces in movies. You never actually really come across people that live in them. And I said to my wife, wouldn't it be great if we lived in an amazing open space? So we started looking around London, and the obvious choice was that all the wharfs along the River Thames would be a great place to start. But unfortunately, the windows are far too small in those spaces because they were for tea and they were for spice. So the light is very dark, and as you know, London's not very bright on the best of times. And we went away from there and we started to ask, how do we find a space to live in a loft? And I started to ask, and then a friend of mine said, you know what, there's a guy apparently in this place in East London called Shoreditch, and it's old Victorian warehouses that were for furniture, and the Jewish community lived there many years before them. And apparently it's big open spaces. So he said, you've got to go and see this guy called James. So we went to Shoreditch, but we'd spent several days looking around this barren place because it was very dodgy, apparently, very dangerous, apparently. But we found this man called James, and James went into this funny little office, and he was sitting down on the desk, and he was very posh. He said, yes, how can I help you? I said, James, apparently you're the man that can find us a loft. He said, yes, I can. He said, what one would you like? I went, hang on a second, you're the estate agent, you're supposed to tell me what one I can have. He said, no, what one do you want? I said, that's a big ask. I said, because listen, don't let me down, because I'm not going to tell you the one I want. And if you say I can't have that one, I'm going to be very disappointed. He said, come, let's go and find. So we went around the corner, and we walked to this particular part, and I said, look, that's it, there, I want that. We'd like that, that would be great. The great thing about these spaces were they were very cheap. 25 years ago, nobody wanted to live in these spaces. And he said, fine, okay, I'll make sure that's yours. I said, hang on a second, how are you going to do that? He said, what I'm going to do, he said, I'm going to put a for sale sign on this building, and within 2 days, the people that own the building will come back and go, what the hell are you doing, sticking a sign on my building? He says, yes, do you want to sell it? Do you want to sell your building? And they said, what? You mean somebody wants to buy it? He said, yeah, somebody wants to buy it, and I've got a buyer for you. He went, that's amazing. Yes, thank you, I want to sell it. And this amazing guy, James, he created now the most creative area apparently in the world, 10,000 artists in 2 square miles of Shoreditch and Hoxton in East London, because he had this amazing lateralism. He we call it lateralism. It's sideswiping the obvious. Finding something that, how do you find that? How do you do that? But doing something very lateral and doing it and winning. And that's what he did. And this area, ironically, I grew up in this area as a kid. And I come from a very poor family, but not poor in love or happiness. My father worked at this amazing hard meat market in London, where he was an outsider artist himself. And luckily, at the age of 4, I discovered my passion. 4, and I had a bag of glitter, magic markers, and plastic scissors. And I was happy. And I knew that this is all I wanted in life, because nothing else apart from glitter, magic markers, because art materials cost nothing. We always had empty cornflake packets and paper. And I could create and make. And then the greatest lucky break I had, because I was obviously a weird, dodgy child, a bit peculiar, a friend of my family, a woman called Valerie, said, this kid's not bonkers, he's dyslexic. My father said, what's dyslexic? She told him. Now, and they were affluent, and she said, look, we will teach Steve 1-to-1. So I never went to school from the age of 4 to 13. I went to their house, and I learnt. And her husband was in charge of several publications. He was a journalist, and in those days, if he was going to make a mirror dinghy, because he did practical boat builder, you would make it in stages, photograph it in stages, and then do the article, and I would help him. And so I had a very privileged life up until 13, and then unfortunately, the time came when I had to go to school. A knock at the door. By then, I'm like Wednesday at the Addams Family. I made all my own clothes. I had a fantastic time, and now I have to go to school. But the good thing is, being badly dyslexic, severely dyslexic, I lived in the art department for 2 years, because 2 years at 15 till I was 15, and of course 2 years in the art department, it goes very quick, funny enough, it goes very quick. And because I was having such great fun. And at 15, my art teacher entered me in for European Artist of the Year competition. And luckily for me, I won it. And there was a guy there, and he said, "Hey kid, do you want to come and work with us in our studio, our design studio, one of London's biggest design agencies?" And I said, "Yes, please," because I've had a right result. This was a big result. And I get my first pay packet, and luckily for me, I've always wanted a horse. And in London, you could go and buy a horse in London in those days. Gypsies would sell horses at this horse market in Southall, and I went and bought, somehow got there, because it's tough being dyslexic to get on transport, and luckily I'm here today, trust me, truly. But there's people who help you, always help you. And I went and bought this horse, never ridden a horse before, and the gypsy said to me, yeah, I bid for it and paid 60 quid for this horse. I've now got this horse. He says, "Okay, come." He takes me to this car park, back of the car park, he gives me a lesson, bareback, gives me a bridle, and again, somehow I managed to get back home into the city of London on this horse. And my parents were always amazing, because we all grew up with animals, so, my mum and dad didn't know I was buying a horse, and I turn up and knock on the door, and straight away, that's amazing, quick, get her in the garden, get her some water, give her some food, never told me off at all. And I had my horse, and the next day I went to work on my horse into this flash design agency, and as I go into the car park, there's the Aston Martin and the Porsche, and I go in with my horse and time my horse up. And at the end of the day, I come out to get my horse, and there's a big pile of horse crap, you can imagine, And I was very, very happy, and I grew up and worked in this design agency for some time, and then I was asked to go and work in the movies, and I worked on the movies. When I was 17 and 18, and I worked on Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then I decided that what I'd like to do is to go and really kind of set my own studio up. And I set my studio up, and I came out this little area that I used to rent from above an old theatre. And as I came out the theatre, walking down the road, I saw this amazing building that bow-fronted, Georgian, roof collapsed, floors collapsed, falling down, but amazing building. I rang the number, and the guy said, yeah. He said, it's a great building. He says, a lot of work to do on it. I went, yeah. He said, what do you want it for? I said, I want it for a design agency. I said, design. He said, oh, that's funny. He said, my younger brother wants to get into that, but he doesn't know what to do. And in those days, it was commercial art. Graphic design didn't exist. There was illustrators, typographers. I said, listen, tell him to come and spend some time with me. He can come and spend some time with me. He can come for a week, and I'll put him right. And there's a silence on the end of the phone, and he says, you're kidding. He said, nobody's ever done this to me before. He said, that's the matter. I said, listen, we're fellow artists. Tell him to come. He said, listen. Now listen. He starts to whisper. He says, they want £47,000 for this building, but they'll accept 28. He says, ring back tomorrow, but don't tell anybody I told you so. I went, no, of course not. Ring back the next day. Very posh estate agent. Yes, how can I help you? I said, I'd like to put an offer for the boathouse. He says, how much are you offering? I said, 28,000. He said, who have you been speaking to? I went, nobody. I said, have you seen the state of the building? I said, it's falling down. He said, 1 second, leave it to me, I'll come back to you. The next day he came back to me, he said, guess what, that building's yours. I'm thinking, where the hell am I going to get 28 grand from? I managed to get 28 grand and I bought the building. And it took me 2 years. Every night I would finish the studio, come back, put my French bleu on, go in to the building and rebuild the roof, rebuild all the floors, rewired it, plastered it. In 2 years I was in my building, and I loved this building. And I need an assistant. How do you employ people? So I asked a friend who had a design agency, and he said, listen, go to all the great art colleges, there's lots of them here in London, and go and get one and just tell them you want an assistant. So I went to Goldsmiths and St Martin's, and there was this flurry of portfolios with all bright kids bringing their work. And I wasn't much older than them myself, funny enough. And they showed me all their work, and Portfolio, but there was one portfolio that was amazing. It was an amazing portfolio, and this little girl, I went, that's great work. I said, you got the job, and she burst into tears. I said, why are you crying? She was so happy and so excited, but now you're going to ask me for my qualification. I said, listen, forget the qualifications. I said, this work is amazing. You work with me. I'm dyslexic. We're going to do great things. And then a week later, my mum and dad came round, and my mum, good London girl, and after Leslie had gone, her name was Leslie, my mother said, you know that Leslie, that girl, she's a lovely girl. You've done really well there. And you know what, Leslie Lamb, her name's Lamb, it's a very unusual name. And I'm going to tell you a story now about my childhood that I've never told you. And I said, really, Mum? She said, yeah. She said, I've never, ever told you this story. And she says, I'm 14 and I'm coming home. And I get to the top of the street and all the kids are saying to me, your dad's dead, your dad's dead, your dad's dead. Because kids can be quite wicked. And my mother runs straight down the road like I would have, because we're kind of quite neurotic, and she runs down the road and she gets to the door of the house, and unfortunately it's true. My mum, who's 14, again from a poor family, but had won a scholarship to a grammar school in London, that she was so happy to be there, and unfortunately she had several younger brothers and sisters. And her life changed that day because she now has to go out and work and look after all these children and her mother. And the next door neighbour, an amazing man, he said, guess what, Maureen? I need an assistant. I need a PA. Would you be my PA? He made a job up there and then. He just knew that he needed to help the family, but they're proud. And he gave my mother her first job. And she said, guess what his name was? I said, no. She said, his name was Robert Lamb. She said, I tell you what, when Leslie comes in tomorrow, ask her whether her family have a factory. Leslie Lamb came in the next morning, and I said to Leslie, Leslie, tell me, has your family got a factory? She said, yeah, my grandfather called Robert Lamb. It turned out her grandfather gave my mother her first job, and I gave his granddaughter her first job. And what I truly about the future is what goes around comes around. And it truly does. Because in this world today, it's about reciprocative work, reciprocative love. Of course, we need to hug and kiss and cuddle to everybody. But also, you need to help people. And if you're working together, don't just take from a client. Give back. Share your client list. Ask, anybody here is good for you on this list. Can I help you? Because believe it or not, it works. Because it truly does. What goes around comes around. And then, one of the biggest ever realization for me was, again, as a kid, 9 years old, because in all poor families, believe it or not, you have a rich aunt. You always have a rich aunt. It's always the rich one. And I went to my rich aunt, and she always was my great patron. She bought everything I painted and everything I made. She bought it. And she had cabinets full of china and glass, the most beautiful things. And I loved my aunt, and I said, when do you use all this? And she said, on special occasions. A week later, she died and never used any of it. I'm 9. I've got brothers. I always had the hand-me-downs. But I had a Sunday best, and I thought, you know what? From this day, I'm going to wear my Sunday best every day, because I'm going to dress for a party every day, and the party will come to me. Because you know what? You don't have to have a special occasion to go out and wear those gold shoes you've got, or that wonderful dress, or that tuxedo white suit you've got. Get it out tomorrow and wear it, because you'll never have that occasion. And make the occasion come to you. And it truly will. Because I get on the tube every day when I go around London, and everybody says, wow, look at that, and I love that, and where are you from? It's amazing. We need to bring this to everybody we meet. So truly, please, dress for a party, and the party will come to you. And if you ever find yourself in East London, in Shoreditch, you're all welcome to come for tea, and I can guarantee you this, I'll be dressed for that party. Thank you very much.